Well, carrying on with our skiff build here, we're moving on to fitting the side planking together, and we've got a special bench that we're going to do it on here. It's just a temporary bench, and I'm going to show you some things about that a little bit later. But what we've done here is we've put our side material on the bench. We've got the first plank that we're going to use, which is at the chine or the bottom of the boat on the starboard side, and we've got the second plank there as well beside it. And what I've done to this first plank, now these planks were purchased, they were flitch sawn. This means they had bark and sapwood on both sides, and they're a little tricky to study when you're purchasing planking like this. I was able to get these planks. They're nice enough for the skiff. They're very nice actually. And what I'm out to do is fit the two side planks together right here on the bench so that I don't have to do any fitting whatsoever on the boat. I'll know they fit. All I have to do is pick them up and use them when I set the boat up. So the first thing I've done is I've taken a string and stretched it down on top of this first plank here and marked it actually with a pencil rather than snapping it, which I don't find to be awfully accurate. Then I set this batten about 5 inches away from the line, and I've used my skill saw with this side of the skill saw against that batten, and I've sawn it in this direction. So what I've done is I've used this as a guide. I've sawn this edge perfectly straight on this piece of wood right here. Now I have no need whatsoever to plane it or fit it or touch it up in any way because it was guide cut, and it came out very, very nice. Now I can use this surface as a guide to cut this plank. So this bench allows me to be able to do that, and I've got this plank actually on top of this one because I have to cut quite a bit off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the saw around, and it's going to cut 1 3/8 away from this cut. So I've had to figure it out how much material I'd like to remove, and we've got it all figured out and we're coordinated there right now. So all I really have to do now is pick up the saw and guide along there and saw this piece. We've got Andrew just going to go along with us there and hold the first piece down tight on top of that second piece because we don't want it to rise up. It may be not perfectly tame, and he's just going to go along beside me there and hold that piece down so that my table saw table doesn't get in between the two pieces and misguide our cut. And now that that cut is complete, we're just going to unclamp everything and take the scrap out of the way, and we're going to lay the first piece down on the bench alongside the second piece and just move them right up against each other and see how well they fit. Now we've got plank number 2 on the starboard side over on the table saw here, and this is the edge that we just cut from plank number 1, so it matches up, you saw that, matches up perfectly with plank number 1. Now we're just going to feed it through the table saw here. I've set the table saw at 9 inches, and we're just going to do a simple rip to cut this to 9 inches. Now, it's very possible that on the other side of the boat, we may not be able to get 9 inches out of that plank. It may be 8.5 or 8 because of some imperfection, and we can always go back to this plank right here and just narrow it down with another cut. Now we're firing up our phase converter here so that we can operate our table saw. Now you don't even need to use a table saw for this rip. You can rip it with a skill saw, just like we did the first ones, or just guide off the first rip with a rip fence. We're going to do it on the table saw because it's right here in front of us, and we've got 2 of us. Andrew's going to help. He's going to tend the end of the board while I'm going to be the sawyer, and really pretty simple. We hold it against the fence nice and tightly, and we don't wiggle it around. We don't have any extended out feed table or in feed table, but it still works quite nicely for us. So this is plank number 2. We've just ripped it on the table saw to 9 inches, and we're going to use that rip in order to guide our skill saw to cut plank number 3. But before we do that, I'd kind of like to show you this bench that I've got set up here. Now it's a temporary bench. It's just set up on 3 sawhorses. I've got a couple of bearers on top of the sawhorses here just to spread it apart a little bit. And I've laid down a couple of staging planks very quickly. They're not even fastened down to the bearers or anything else. The whole idea of those 2 planks is really to support these bearers that I've got across. Now these are very important to me. They're nice straight pieces of 2x4, and our planks lay right on them. They're sacrificial in a sense. We're cutting into them, but we're not cutting into them so deep that they become weak or anything like that. And the other thing that we've got going on here is I've got these little temporary spaces that I've clamped on here. Now I can take them off and put them on anytime I like. I've tapered the ends of them down just with a simple cut on the bandsaw so that it makes it easier for me to clamp them on with a 5-inch clamp. Nice, Andrew. We put them every other bearer here. Those are just designed to hold the plank up above the plank that we're trying to cut. So now we've got plank number 2 up on top of and alongside plank number 3, and we're going to do exactly the same thing we did on the first cut. We're just going to use plank number 2 as a guide and run down there with our skill saw and cut plank number 3. Then we can just remove all the clamps, and we're going to remove our spacers, and we're going to set all 3 planks down on the bench and run a few bar clamps across them and clamp them together on a temporary basis just to see how well it fits. And you can see that it fits perfectly well. There's actually no space in between the planks whatsoever. They're going to cooperate for us really nicely when we put them on the skiff. And there is a little bit more work to do. We're going to cut down the shear plank, plank number 3, probably to 8 inches or so in the table saw. We don't need that much material aft because the boat's considerably lower, but up forward we do need a straight cut here because we're going to probably add one tiny little bit more piece up forward to get to the stem head, and then we have to actually cut quite a bit of material off the bottom of plank number 1 because the other side of the boat is not, the plank on that side is not quite as wide as this plank, so we're going to make all the planks exactly the same width. This plank number 1 will be identical to the one on the other side, so also with this one and this one as well. And now what we're off to do is do exactly the same thing on the other side as we did on the first side. We're going to put plank number 1 up, straighten the edge, use it to cut plank number 2. We're going to rip that one in a table saw and then use it to cut plank number 3, and then we're going to rip the third one in the table saw as well.